Hey, what's up, everybody? Sorry about the delay. I was just getting some water because I have been chastised in the past for beginning my streams without sufficient water. What is going on, everybody? It is Tuesday afternoon here in California, and I've got some adventure prep to do. I'm actually in kind of a light week this week, which is a blessing because I had a kind of a busy weekend. So I've got one session on Friday, which is Mansionscape. I've got my Secrets of Sharn game on Sunday. I don't know why I always think that's the game's on Saturday. And then next week, I am resuming play on my home game. Hey. Hey, David, what's up? I'll never make fun of you for getting water again. David mentioned it one time, I think, and I have deeply internalized it. He was being perfectly reasonable. I am the one who is every single time I'm like, oh, water. Yes, but I have my home game is currently on hiatus, and we are coming back next week, next Tuesday. And because we are basically transitioning to a new arc, there is a lot of work I have to do to kind of front load that in order to get that ready. And one of the things that means is that my players are traveling from one corner of the world to the other in order to basically pursue this new arc. For those of you who don't know, I am running a 5th edition mercenary company campaign. So pretty much the same premise as something like the Chain of Acheron by MCDM or the Black Company by Glenn Cook. The characters are a mercenary army that basically go around the world, take contracts, and get involved in different, political situations, different nations in times of crisis and conflict, kind of as an excuse to world build. My setting of Ondune, which you can see here. I'm trying to figure out which way OBS, if I'm mirrored or not. Here, yes, this is Ondune right here. Enjoy. Sorry for the delay. It always does that whenever I try to mess with OBS. So it's kind of an excuse to world build my setting to flesh it out, and in the process, I have to do a lot of design. Like I have to kind of come from nothing and say, okay, what would be here, what would be here, and what would be here. So currently, my characters are traveling from Coombe, which hopefully this works. I should be able to mess with the map here, and then it should affect what you guys see. Coombe, kind of up here in the corner. This is the Dwarven homeland. They've just completed a contract there, and they're going to be moving. Here, let's see if we can do a little map, a little drawing on this guy. I think I got this all set up. Hopefully this works. It might be a little slow, so bear with me. Ah, nope, that's not what I wanted. Nope, we want to do this. Okay, we want to go this way. Right, like that. They're going to go that way, and then they're going to come down here like that, and then they're gonna come over here somewhere, and then their company's gonna split, but they are gonna go this direction. I think they eventually end up like here. They do a little like side plot thing that takes them over here ish. I haven't quite decided, and then they head this way towards their contract in Harashta, which is this kind of a section of the continent of Oros. They're going to be involved with this power. Ah, that's way too big. Oh God. Whatever. With this power here, Throka's Cradle. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a roundabout journey. They could theoretically go the other way and come down from a little framey and laggy. Okay, well, thanks, David. I can try not to do too much of it. They could theoretically come down the other direction, but they've already been up that way. Oh yeah, and I very intentionally, of course, did the dotted line. They could come down the other direction, but I feel like that's not as. First of all, they've already been that way, so I wanted to go a different direction to kind of make a point about establishing more parts of the world. Because their company has to split, they're basically sending one half of their army to another contract across the world. It also makes more sense for them to go this way because that other army is going this direction. It's going like here. So that was kind of the thinking. Let me delete that one for now because they're not going that direction. And we'll just do this one at a time. Thank you for your patience, everybody. Sorry, this is kind of Janktown, USA. So what I need to do then is I need to determine, let me just finish drawing this, where they're going. Oh no, God, what have I done? Okay, draw it, please, like that. Okay, now I should be able to stop messing with it. We'll zoom in there in a second when we need to. But yeah, that is kind of their very janky route. You know what? Let's actually do it in one go. That's going to bother me. Let's go like this. Sorry, everybody. Let's go like that. Oh, so much better. Okay, cool. Great. So I should be able to just leave that there now, and hopefully it doesn't get too laggy. Great. Okay, so the way that I do these sessions, when I have the characters cross the world, I was kind of torn because I didn't want it to be a thing where we just teleport, 6 months in time and now you're on the other side of the world. I wanted it to be the kind of thing where they get a sense of the size and scope of the world, but I don't want it to be something that like takes a huge chunk of time sort of in game in order to get places. Like I'd like them to kind of cross large swaths of the world relatively quickly, but still having some sense of kind of the world that they're passing through. And so the way that I do this is I do, I was originally thinking like a skill challenge, but because for the most part they are, hey, what's up, Vaughn? Yeah, everybody hide the good China. Because for the most part they are, hiring ships and they're just sort of like passengers on ships that are traveling, the skill challenge model doesn't work the best because they're kind of just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. They're often not, it doesn't really make as much sense if they're paying for passage for them to like operate the ship or whatever. They have yet to spend money on any kind of permanent transportation, like to buy their own vessel. So they basically are relying on passing ships and hiring passage. So the way that I do this then is I say that rather than them mechanizing the voyage is kind of a fast travel thing where what we usually do is a couple of scenes. I'll say, okay, everybody give me one scene of something that you're doing as you're traveling. And I'll intersperse that with descriptions of the terrain or things that might happen on the ship. But then when they get to a harbor, you get to a port, basically like a changeover, right? Or a layover, if you're on a flight. That's when I will have them do a small skill challenge in that port to basically represent them recruiting new mercenaries, getting supplies, and booking passage, right? So then they have like a small little skill challenge that they do there, and if that's successful, then they can proceed. They will proceed anyway, but a failure in that skill challenge might cost them some of their resources, right? It might mean they have to spend extra coin, they have to hire a more expensive ship, or it might mean that their mercenaries while they're in that port kind of cause some damage and it damages their party's renown, that kind of a thing. So the task today then, all that to say, is that I would like to figure out the 3 ports that they kind of get bounced between from point A to point B. Vaughn says, is there any chance of being blown off course or having an encounter along the way? So the tricky thing about that, Vaughn, it's an interesting question, is that blown off course maybe, but the trick with an encounter is that they are traveling with an army of about 500 soldiers. So any encounter that you would do would have to be some like large scale kind of conflict, which makes it difficult to run, especially considering the sizes of the ships that they're involved in. But getting blown off course is definitely a possibility. I've mainly been having it affect the company's 3 scores. So the mercenary company at all times has coin, has morale, and renown are the 3 things that are kind of like, and they have scores of 1 to 20. Vaughn, you'd be familiar with this idea. The agency in our campaign has scores as well, but their company has 3 scores: coin, morale, and renown. And those are mainly the things that I challenge as they move from one place to the other. But encounters are tricky. So if I'm going to do an encounter, it's more likely to be an encounter in the port with the characters, right? That happened the last time they traveled. They were basically in the territory of some local gangsters who came by to kind of rumble them, not realizing that they represented this entire mercenary army. So encounters get tricky when you have an entire army there. But we have 3 ports that we'd like to talk about. The first one I know a little bit about, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but I don't really know much about I know almost nothing about Port 2, and I have like a rough idea about Port 3. And we will cover Port 3 when we get there. But Port 1, we're going to talk about. We're just basically going to world build the concepts here. Like, I'm not too worried about the actual adventure prep of it. Hey, what's up, M. Grant? Thanks for coming. I'm not too worried about the actual adventure prep. I kind of just want to talk about the world and what's going on in these locations and some cool things and flavorful stuff they can interact with. You know, what are these places? How do they contribute to the story? How do they contribute to the overall narrative of the world? So our characters are headed from Coombe. They're going north, a little bit north, but mostly they're going west over, oh, Grant Campbell is here as well. We got the double Grants, M. Grant and Grant Campbell. Thanks for coming, everybody. They're going west. They're going west over the coastline from Coombe across the gigantic ocean, which is this large ocean. I mean, hence the name. To the north part of Andoon, but it gets its name not from its size, even though it is very big, but it gets its name from the giants that live there. It is kind of the home of several different types of giants, but predominantly frost giants that live here in this continent of Deimos, which this map doesn't really show, but is kind of like a frozen Arctic isthmus. They are traveling along, and they end up at this first port. The idea was to have them go basically through almost a Panama Canal style canal or crossing here in Deimos. So pardon me while I kind of zoom in. This is just going to be a little laggy. But they are coming here to a thin portion of Deimos. And the idea here was, I don't know if anyone here in the call, or everyone here in the chat, I would be surprised if you have, but let me know, has ever been to the town of Catalina Island. Catalina is a small little resort town. Hey, Nuker Wolf, wow, we got a lot of people here. What's going on? It's lovely to see you all. Catalina is a small like resort town on an island 30 minutes off the coast of California, sort of near Los Angeles where I live. I've only been once, but we went as sort of a birthday thing last year. And there's an interesting geographical feature at Catalina that I was thinking of for this location. There's a town there called Two Harbors. And the idea is that basically there's a narrow section of the island where, you know, it's maybe only, you know, however many thousand feet across. Maybe even, I don't know exactly how far across it is, but it's like, you know, a big island that kind of narrows down in one portion. And there is a harbor, like the town stretches across that little bit. I don't believe there's a canal, but I loved the image of that there's like a harbor on both sides of this narrow little land bridge that separates this island. And I wanted to do something like that, but I liked the idea of like a cold, sort of like, you know, Arctic version of that. Potentially a place that has some frost giants living there. And so that town is called Two Harbors, and I liked the idea of making a reference to Two Harbors by calling this port Tva Harbors, and say that, you know, in Andoon, the frost giant, like the giant word for two is Tva, right? It feels kind of Norse, right? But not exactly. And so I like the notion that this first port they come to is called Tva Harbors. And it is a frost giant town, but it is also, you know, home to, because other ships would pass through here, it would be like kind of more cosmopolitan than some other frost giant communities. Now, Andoon is a world where there are very few locked in alignments, right? Like there's not a lot of, you know, all hobgoblins are lawful evil and all goblins are chaotic evil, that kind of a thing. So this does not necessarily mean that this town is any more dangerous, because frost giants in my setting are not inherently evil any more than like the Norse were inherently evil. Yeah, you definitely get frost giant raiders. That's a thing to worry about, right? But I like the notion that you can easily have these kind of trade towns in the same way that places like Hedeby and Birka and Novgorod would have been kind of Norse trading towns, you know, in the 900s or so. So the summary here is that this is kind of a frost giant trading town that permits ships to cross the narrow land bridge. All yogs are hailed, yeah. To cross the narrow land bridge to access that separates gigantic from draconic. Yeah, that's what was interesting about naming the oceans here, is that like I found that any ocean name that I came up with never quite sounded right. Like seas, I think, are easy to name. Sea of Storms, the Sea of Swords, and Sea of Seals, and things like that, right? But like something about in English, like ocean, I think with the exception of like the Indian Ocean, every ocean that we have, Yahweh for all, every ocean that we have on Earth has a word that ends in IC. So Atlantic, right? Pacific, Arctic, those kinds of things. Indian being, I think, the exception. Maybe there's an ocean I'm forgetting, but I believe that's the 4 oceans. Antarctic, I guess. And so I wanted a word that ended in IC for these oceans, but everything I was trying didn't really work. Filled with zombies, just stacked with zombies. And so I went with draconic for the main one, because that kind of worked for me. And then it was trying to find like the difference between the other ones, right? So like gigantic then became the Northern Ocean. And then the Santa Clarita. I think some of these are coming in later. Yeah. I've got a delay on a bunch of M. Grant's messages. And then the draconic, gigantic, and then the southern one is the Tritonic Ocean, because the Tritons live there, right? So it's about finding words that end in IC to make that work. Great. Awesome. So that's the concept here. I was thinking about, I really love this idea of there not being an actual like channel. You know, because the obvious thing to do here would be to kind of like Panama Canal that shit, right? The Humanic Ocean, yeah. Draconic, gigantic, and Tritonic are the 3. Tritonic is far to the south. But I love the idea of there not actually being a channel in Tva harbors. Right, because that would be the obvious thing to do would be to make like a canal and to cut it into the land and say, okay, the ships like, you know, can sail down this, maybe do locks and stuff like that. But I don't think that that's quite to the level of like engineering technology that the Frost Giants have. It's not like they couldn't maybe bring in dwarves or something to do it, but I love the idea that like instead what they do is the giants just pick up the ships and portage them across the like, you know, however far it is, like the 1,000 feet or whatever. I don't know how big, mile or whatever, across from this side to that side, because they're giants, right? Maybe they have some kind of elaborate like winch and pulley, but there's something kind of cool about them just having, about the giants just getting in the water and just like, okay, here we go, and like, you know, like pallbearers carrying it across. Yes, it is an isthmus full of icebergs. So let's talk about the terrain. It's not actually an isthmus, it's actually an extremely long peninsula that goes all the way out to another kind of smaller landmass, but I think that landmass is so small it doesn't really connect 2 continents. It's basically a super long peninsula. Ooh, a giant ice tunnel is cool too. I don't hate that. I like that. Okay, so a long peninsula, a tiny sliver of actual land surrounded by ice flows and I'll move you today, so here for business and pleasure. Yeah, exactly. Like something to me about them picking the ship up and carrying it, because it would also make it really easy to careen. Maybe it's like a good place for careening then, right? That they would pick it up and they'd set it down and then they could careen it and then the giants would pick it back up again and then dump it in. You'd have to like unload all your cargo, right? To make it like easier, and then they'd pick up the ship and carry it. Like something about it being kind of inefficient is interesting to me, right? That like rather than it being the most efficient like magical thing, like what's the most efficient answer would be like a channel, right? Would be like a Panama Canal style thing. But I love the idea of like the awkwardness of them having to physically pick up the ship and carry it over the isthmus. Surrounded by ice flows and icebergs. Freezing cold, midnight sun type stuff. They are in the summer, so yeah, that's an interesting idea. Maybe that's a climate thing. But like freezing cold. Solve all problems through muscles. Yeah, exactly. Like muscles are their main way of solving problems. Freezing. Oh, what did I write? Freezing cold, midnight sun. Yeah, that's cool. Midnight sun. This works just fine. Yeah, they just like, and it's, you know, it's like half a dozen frost giants carrying this huge ship across the way and then plonking it back in. It is also set in kind of a little bit of a, what was I gonna say, like an ancient world kind of a vibe. So there's sort of a like there's sort of a like triremes and like Roman galleys. Like that's kind of the level of technology we're talking about. Obviously ships like that couldn't cross in these kinds of cold waters, but my point is that would actually make these ships they drag ships across. That's cool. I could see that too. A world's strongest giant contest. I think it's both. I think it's like I think they have the pallbearers, right? They just like half dip. But then I think there's like a special competition they do to see if they could like, yeah, because I'm thinking about those guys who drag those trucks, right? It was like that, but with ships. Like, can one giant do it? So maybe they don't use real ships for that, right? Maybe they like that's like a sporting event where it's like, okay, can this giant pull one ship all by itself over the thing? But it's like a wreck. It's like a derelict ship, right? Because the amount of damage that would do dragging a ship, right? Ooh, you could put sleds on it, but that would make it go faster, right? Like a dog sled. That's so silly. Okay, surrounded by ice floes and icebergs, freezing cold midnight sun is the climate. Okay, so the town is constructed at an especially narrow point between two bays, meaning that only like half a mile separates one ocean from the other. Okay, so inhabitants. There are definitely humans that live here. Humans live in Deimos as well as frost giants. I like the idea, like I guess what's the history? Let's talk about this history. I don't really know the like long-term history of the frost giants in my setting. Ooh, what if the giants doing the towing are paying a penance or fulfilling a punishment? That's interesting. I kind of like it a little more that it's like a it's a job, right? It's like a task. I liked the joke. I think it was Nuker Wolf made about, "Hi, my name is Gormac. I'll be carrying your ship today," right? Once a gnome came saying his machine could do this faster, but a frost giant named John Henry. But yeah, that's exactly it. Giant skis can then drag it through the snow. See, I think all your guys' ideas are like too smart. I want them to be a little dumb. You know what I mean? Like I want the fact that they pick them up. That it's so silly, right? Because I like the idea of them like, okay, guys, all right, lift with your knees. Here we go. And then, oh, okay, here we go. And they're like walking it. I think all of these are much more efficient ideas. Where I think there's something charming about the himbo energy of just picking up the fucking thing. But I like the idea of maybe there's an element to it where there's a penance or whatever. Let's talk about the history of this place, because that might settle some of these, right? Like the ship is secured to a wooden frame to hold it upright. Hold it upright? Oh, hold it upright. I see. I was imagining it like this. Like, why would they do that? And then drag it through the snow. Like, again, I think that makes sense. Move trees under them to roll them like, oh yeah, like in Les Mis. That's cool too. These are all these cool ideas. Don't ruin my idea. Gosh darn it, you guys. Okay, let's talk about the history of these giants for a second. So here is about all I know the frost giants in Untune. What do we know about them? What do we know about frost giants? Let's make a sidebar here. They live in the north. Frost giants. A palanquin of giants. It's not bad, honestly. That's basically what I'm imagining, Vaughn. Is that like they grab it, right? But yeah, it's like 4 or 5 guys, like pallbearers, right? Okay, so they live in the north. In the north, they occasionally go raiding in the summertime, or thanks to a scarcity in certain resources. They occasionally go raiding in the summertime. They have ice magic that can manipulate frozen water. Hunting is a massive part of their culture. They must like cold water. Perhaps that. Hunting is a massive part of their culture. Rapid fire replies from ADD commentators. Slow, we have to write what we think. Hunting is a massive part of their culture. They believe they do not get into the afterlife unless slain in battle by a great beast. This means they're actually somewhat cowardly. Actually somewhat cowardly in war because they don't want to die. They don't want to die in any other battle. And like not every giant believes that, but it's kind of like a folk belief. That's about what we know. Oh, also, they are tall boys. They're very tall. Is it a punishment for poaching in another's territory? Yeah, the punishment angle is tough for me. Yeah, I like a family trade. I like the idea that this is like there's a clan of frost giants that live here that do this, right? And this is like their thing. You know what I mean? I also think that like I think we can assume culturally that this is a cosmopolitan port, comparatively speaking, right? That you would get Twa Harbors is frequented by travelers from all over the world and thus is much less isolated than other communities in Deimos. So like, you know, blizzards sweep in from nowhere, punishingly cold nights. Vaughn says, "Oh, the Giants trade for information about big game because they all want to go after it to get into Valhalla." Yeah, I like that. That's kind of interesting. That like people would ask them. Like, I even like that it's maybe information about it. I mean, I feel like they would have to have like actual trade too. But I like the idea that they ask them. They ask them like, you know, did you see anything big on your way over here? Right? They're asking like, oh, you know, there's like kind of this like Fisher story about like how many humps and like, did you see this and did you see that? Right? Like, great. There's a lot of good questions. It all started one day when great granddad moved ship by accident to the wrong side. Yeah, that's funny. I like the idea of certain families. You have to have a contact. Yeah, like I mean, I think it's like valet parking. You know what I mean? Like I think when you come up, they ask you like, hey, do you want to have your thing carried over and it costs this much or whatever. Vaughn asks, what's their preferred prey dragons? Yeah, so they hunt all kinds of stuff. We've got definitely there are some like whales, remoras for sure, frostworms, white dragons. There's a monster I made called a wave worm, which is basically like a sea serpent. And then, you know, other dire animals. So, you know, big polar bears and things like that. Polar bears. I could see like moose, you know, things like that are not as like heroic to you know, fight or to hunt. But yeah, lots of stuff like that. Okay. Inhabitants. So definitely frost giants. I like the idea that it's somebody made a point about it being one family of frost giants that founded the town. They make their money not by raiding, but by... Oh, no, they don't go raiding in the summertime. What am I thinking about? They go raiding in the winter when it's cold. Not by raiding, but by trading, but by taxing the ships that pass through. Okay, we got a lot of chats here. I did us a favor because some captain pulled a thorn or a spear. Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, I kind of like that. The dire penguin prey likes to prey on puny ships. The giant started following ships around to catch their prey in action. That's cool. Wave worms in particular hate ships. They seek them out and try to sink them. So there's actually something to that, Vaughn. I have to put dire penguin in there. Dire penguin, because that's amazing. Oh, Kraken, of course. Duh. What was I thinking? Dragon turtles. A little cold for dragon turtles, but yeah, I can see it. Okay. So that's the history. Yeah, I like the idea of like there being kind of like a mythic, like a Paul Bunyan figure, right? That there's like a mythic history. Is that a ship captain sailing around the like a ship captain, like here I'm gonna move the map so it'll get a little laggy, but a ship captain like coming from this bay that was going to have to cross all the way around Deimos, right? All the way around, like did a favor for a giant near Tva harbors, sailing around Deimos, did a favor for a giant near Tva harbors, and in exchange the giant hefted their ship and plopped it on the other side, saving them, a long sail, a long voyage. So like the idea is that like, did that really happen? Maybe it was a bunch of giants. Maybe they found some secret way through, or the giant like told them about a way through or something. Like, who knows? But that's the mythic history, right? And so now this particular family of giants stays here and does this because this is what they believe they're kind of like calling to be, right? What if those are in competition for the dire penguin prey? They're pulling the teeth from their competitors and carrying the ships across, so there's less prey. Ooh, yeah, there's definitely some volcanoes. I feel like there's kind of an Iceland thing in some areas, right? Where it's like a little bit warmer. Yeah, I could see an Iceland vibe. That's kind of interesting. Terrain, Iceland-esque. Many dormant volcanoes. Yeah, that's cool. That's the thing. It's not developed yet, so you tell me. I know that Rubicos does have a lot of does a lot of volcanoes. Maybe this like peninsula out here, this one's got some kind of Iceland vibes to it. Okay. So the culture is a cosmopolitan port, comparatively speaking. I would like to think of like how that economy works. Ooh, the hot springs. Yeah, that's cool. How does that economy? I like the idea of like bathhouses. Yeah. Like almost like a Turkish bath or something, right? Where it's like a sweat house place to warm up, or sweat lodge, like some kind of a place where they go. Sorry, I'll eat some cheese. So I want to think about this like. There's a lot of talk about like how does this work? Like, do they just charge you for it? Is it a complimentary service? Something about like it's almost like parking validation. I feel like where if you come to the port and you stay, that like yeah, that's cool. That like if you buy stuff in the port, right? If you buy pelts or meat or whatever, then you get your like, yeah, that's so funny. Okay, so validation, because I think my players will appreciate this joke, that like the giants hoist your ship for free and don't and perhaps give you a ticket or a bill or whatever that you have to pay before returning to your vessel. If you spend money you spend X amount of money in the town, you get the ticket validated, right? Like that's again, I think the more kind of parking jokes you can make here, I think that's gonna resonate. That's gonna be fun. So like I think that they do it and it's like, oh no, you know, it's just what we do. It's how we get the ships across. And like they ask you, right? Like, where are you going? Are you headed to Draconic Ocean? Or are you going along DMOs and you're just stopping here? That's how they like basically facilitate their trade. You know, is that if you trade stuff or you do whatever, then they validate. Vaughn says volcanic land is very fertile. Perhaps something like coffee or other exotic trade goods is only grown on the slopes of the volcano. That's cool. I dig that. Let's see. I like the idea of coffee being grown up this far. Yeah, that's interesting. So the culture is very cosmopolitan. There's something cool about that too, that like you would end up with this like, yeah, there's a parking boot. Yeah, absolutely. One of the ships is impounded. An impounded ship. An impounded ship. That's been there too long or didn't pay their fee or whatever. Yeah, that's very funny. Is it locked in ice? I love that. Yeah, they like, and then until you pay your thing, then they can do it. Yeah, so they carry it across and then they lock it in ice. Yep. Okay. Parking. That's so stupid. The once deposited, because like I think part of the purpose of these sessions, right, isn't to like necessarily like, yes, it's to world build, but it's also to kind of like thematically what you're saying here is like, look at how big and crazy the world is. Like look at all these other locations that we could go to and have these other adventures in, right? I think that's a large part of the point of these kind of like world traveling sessions, in at least in the Menagerie anyway, is that like everywhere is weird and crazy and has these like unusual, you know, features and stuff. I don't know why I'm like a big fan of world building that's like inefficient, like not inefficient in like a ooh yeah, that's great, Vaughn. Yeah, they use their kind of warships rather than like long ships, right, made of wood, because wood is relatively scarce up here. They just basically sail icebergs around as their warships. So yeah, definitely I could see that. I'm a big fan of world building that is like inefficient or like dumb. You know, understand what I'm saying? Where it's like places and civilizations. Ooh, all the icebergs are mysteriously in your way. That's cool. All the like civilizations and cultures that like don't make good choices. You know what I mean? Or like back themselves into weird corners, or have these like unusual cultural hangups that get them in trouble. Like that to me feels very real, as opposed to saying that like everything is super neat and clean and efficient. So I think that's why I'm drawn to these like dumber, sillier ideas, is because that feels more lived into me than like a very efficient, like, okay, it would function like this, right? Once deposited, your ship is locked in ice until you pay your fee. If you spend X amount of money in the town, you get the ticket validated. Great, I love that. Okay. So we're talking about it being cosmopolitan. I think that there's like, under inhabitants maybe. Others. They're definitely humans, like native humans. Native humans who live in Twa Harbors. I'm trying to figure out, like, I don't know much about the humans that live up here. There are definitely humans that are native to Deimos. Well, not native to, but ended up there. Well, actually, that's interesting. Because it's connected to... So let's zoom out a little bit. Apologies for the lag that's about to happen. Let's go all the way out. So we have our various continents here, right? We have, is it 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. Emeros, Deimos, Rubicos, Oros, Sapphiros, Thanatos, Obsidios. Yeah, we have 7 continents. And the conceit is that most of the major peoples, most of the major world powers, orcs, elves, dwarves, and humans, originated in particular continents. So dwarves are originally native to Rubicos. right? Kind of mountainous, sort of North America, kind of a climate. North America, Russia, like that kind of like, you know, semi-polar taiga type stuff. The elves are native to Emeros and the Wombwood, this like large forest that kind of spreads across most of the continent. Orcs are native to Oros, this primeval paradise in the center. And then humans are originally native to Thanatos, which is the kind of now the continent of death, but back in the day, back in the like, you know, sort of before recorded time, they lived there, and then they spread out to both Sapphiros, more of kind of a desert, Mediterranean kind of a climate, and then Obsidios, which is largely dominated by jungle. And obviously there are multiple biomes inside each continent. You don't think about Asia as being just one thing, right? Like there are lots of different ones, but they have kind of like predominantly, in the way you think about like South America being kind of dominated by the Amazon, right? Like it has mountains and it has plains and it has other areas, but it's largely sort of jungle, right? It's kind of, Obsidios is kind of like that, or all the continents kind of have that thing going for them. They all have mountains and stuff. But Deimos then didn't end up with any like native people. Giants live there. Ooh, what if Goliaths live here? That's cool. Yeah. Goliaths. I like that. I also think you would get others, right? So you'd have dwarves from Rubicos, halfling sailors, elven hunters, you know, human merchants, all manner of dwarven craftsmen, all manner of peoples live here at this intersection, because it's this like, you know, it's this intersection of trade, and it's you know, I'm thinking about like the like Gibraltar or Giza, right? I would think that the whole peninsula is a mountain range with the rare. Yeah, I think definitely there's like one mountain range that runs along that. That's actually really smart, Vaughn. I like that. The Rapid Folk. The peninsula is actually one long mountain range. So that would mean then that like Twa Harbors is nestled between two mountains, which is actually how Two Harbors is in Catalina. Well, they're hills, but they're, you know, they're big. Yeah, I like that. So it's nestled between two mountains. You kind of go through there. They carry it across, and I think it's like two bays, right? So it's like there's a little stretch in the middle. They carry it along, and then like the city is like kind of like designed along those bays. I love that. Okay, great. I want to figure out these Goliaths. So I don't really have Goliaths in my setting at all yet. We have giants that live here, and it feels like they would have to in some way be descended from giants. I don't love the idea of like half giants, you know, where they're like, I kind of want them to be their own thing. I mean, the players don't have to like interact much with the Goliaths beyond just seeing them, right? Like, my instinct is to do kind of like a kind of like an Inuit thing, right, where they live on the ice floes and they're, you know, hunter-gatherers. But I think the frost giants already kind of do that. Yeah, maybe, Vaughn, but that's way over there. We're here right now. We're in Twa Harbors. Vaughn is like way off over there. Yeah, the Goliaths. What is their deal? Because like the frost giants already kind of feel like they have a little bit of Norse in them, I guess, right, with the raiding. Are the Goliaths, you're more like Inuit in that they live out on the ice floes and they hunt seals and stuff? Or do they... Yeah, I don't know. Ooh. Vaughn's getting... That's interesting. I like that. I mean, I think that would maybe break down for some of them. But there's something cool about that, actually. Because I feel like Hill, Cloud, those are weird. But like Frost Goliaths and like Fire Goliaths feel interesting to me. Okay, yeah, like mountain folk, South American higher elevation, like the Andes. And just vultures, they're like scavengers. The idea of them somehow being like related to the giants is cool. I don't think it works for every type because I feel like storm Goliaths are cool though. I don't think it works for hill, and it doesn't work for what my stone giants are like. But I like the idea of like frost, fire, cloud, and storm maybe having different types of Goliaths. It's interesting. With all those islands scattered outside the blast zone, each island can have anything that has developed on it. Yeah, I mean they're very icy. You know, they're pretty inhospitable, but you could absolutely have tons of little things like that. Of course, they're not really going to be staying very long. They're just kind of passing through. Yeah, are they associated with? Are they associated with frost giants? Like, but like, what's the story there? You know. Because my instinct is to like make them the hill Goliaths never learn to swim and drown. But I think it could work. I think there's something strong in that idea, right? That they have these associations with these other types of giants. But I don't know how do you get around it if it isn't just like the giants bred with humans, you know, which feels weird to me. You can do mythological stuff like they're giants cursed to be smaller or whatever, but that also feels kind of meh. Like I like the maybe like Greenpeace. I like the idea of like convergent evolution almost against the giants hunting. Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad. I like the idea of like them like adopting or like developing similarities to the giants that they live near. Ooh. Yeah, it being kind of symbiotic is interesting. Maybe the Goliaths just chose the giants to be their gods or protectors. Yeah. We're close there. I just don't quite have like the hook. Like them choosing them is interesting. Yeah. See, that's the half giant idea Nuker's got. My thought is the story of a great hero who was so strong he defeated giants and bedded one. And then they are the descendants of that couple, kind of like Hercules. I mean, I think that could be one of their myths, but that feels a little like, you know, like we all come from one union. I like them, like, choosing them to be... Yeah, that's true. Sorry, Grant. Or M. Grant. Yeah. Again, I think M. Grant is, like, behind everybody else when he comes in with these. Yeah, I agree, Vaughn. I don't think the story necessarily has to be true either. Because that's my instinct, is that like the kind of seal hunter thing is tropey, and like there's a lot more complexity to that culture that I don't know enough about to say anything. And I feel like that's where you would immediately go with a kind of like, we live in a cold place, so blah blah blah, right? It's like the Sami or a lot of the like original people that live in like northern Siberia too, right? There's a lot of diversity of culture that lives in that part of the world. And I feel like that's not as interesting. I mean, that's interesting, but like doing like seal hunting and, you know, everything you would immediately assume living in a cold place isn't as interesting as coming up with something original. So I appreciate that, M. Grant. Yeah, I feel like I'm getting stuck on this Goliath thing. This is maybe not where we should be putting our effort. Yeah, we spent an hour on just Tva Harbors, and they're only going to be here for a little bit. We spent more time on Tva Harbors than I think they're going to be in Tva Harbors. So I think this is good. I think Goliaths are there. I don't necessarily know what else you would do there. I'll have to come back to it. Like, do they consider giants their gods or protectors? Like some association there. Like I like that. I really like the because Goliath to me always being like giant kin or whatever felt like they were similar, but like I never understood how you got there, right? So the idea of them kind of being devoted to giants is interesting to me. Almost like in the way that like Genasi are descended from genies as well. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on from Tval Harbors. I feel like that's pretty good. Ooh, there is a real world theory of animals in cold climates growing bigger to stay warm. That's cool. Are they simply bigger humans? To help stay warm. Yeah, I'm into that. Okay, let's move on. So this is what's tricky, is that they end up now coming further down the coast, and they stop at a port basically near the tip of Rubicos down here. Sorry, I'm not moving it around. It makes it drag. But they stop at a port like near the tip of Rubicos. And so what I don't know is like anything about it. This is the problem, right? I don't really know much about this next port. There are two things that I know story-wise about this area. Is that A, they send off one chunk of their army to go take another contract, and then two. So here, let me draw a thing. Two, they end up meeting a contact of theirs that they owe a favor to, a pirate captain that they promised they would help. Basically, they owe a favor to. So they come down this way, and they end up in like some kind of a port in this area, right? I don't know much about it. So I don't really know what this place is. So it really could kind of be anything. The terrain is vaguely, Rubicos is kind of a North America analog for like climate and terrain, right? Rubicos is mountainous, and largely unsettled. Tall forests, like pine, evergreen forests, long winters, like basically historically what has happened in this part of the world is that there was oh, that's interesting. The Goliaths are just survivors of many long ago shipwrecks among the icebergs and fjords. That's cool. I don't hate that. Something like that. Shipwrecks amid the fjords. Yeah, is there a delay? I feel like there's a delay. Like longer than usual. So Rubicos is mountainous, largely unsettled. Yeah, I'll start with the history. So historically, what has happened in this part of the world is that, sorry, while I zoom out, you can see that there are these sections of the map that have that kind of like pallid, dark gray, black coloration, right? And that is the result of a war, like this catastrophic war that kind of like ravaged the southern half of the world as the dead poured out of Thanatos and tried to basically conquer the world and spread and do all the undead stuff. They pushed those undead back, and they ended the war about 30-ish years ago in the game. But they have left like these big scars on kind of like the lower portions of the world down there, the southern portions of the world. The bigger problem is that this pushed many people, humans that lived in those areas, out. Like it basically like displaced all of these people who who then went moving up north into the jungles and into the like the other parts of Ondune. Mainly these people would have been humans who kind of lived in the southern like half of the globe, and they began moving northwards. And so both Emeros and Rubicos have kind of become flooded with human refugees trying to escape this devastation. I mean, Obsidios, if you look at it, it really didn't take that bad of a hit. I mean, you know, it was bad, but compared to something like Oros or Sapphiros, which got hit much worse. But that doesn't mean that it didn't cause people to panic and flee, right? And so Rubicos is now kind of, it was originally inhabited by dwarves, but the dwarves tended to live underground. So its surface is largely unsettled. Goblins live there. Red dragons live there, but otherwise it's mostly kind of like untouched land because the dwarves that live there mostly lived underground. So you will sometimes see, you know, dwarven, like evidence of dwarven architecture on mountains and things like that, but most of the kind of lowlands are untouched. As mountainous, its lowlands largely unsettled. But that's changing now, as people kind of come flooding in. So there's human like settlers who are moving into Rubicos from the south. Kind of think like rather than a sort of North American analog for that, kind of think about like, because we have much more of like an ancient vibe, think about like Germania, right? Where it's just like, to the Romans, that would have felt very unsettled. Obviously, you know, there are Germans who live there, so it's not that unsettled, but these deep forests and this kind of sense of wilderness, right? Rubicos is a lot of that. But because this is a relatively southern portion of it, I don't think it's impossible for there to have been like Vaughn is just like fixated on this peninsula. I don't think it's unreasonable for there to have been cities along here that would have been founded by people earlier than the settlements, right? That like I feel like you would have gotten settlements here before the refugees, right? Because it's coastal and you've got the Oros is so close and it's like relatively close to Emeros. Like I feel like this is maybe another unpossible. Did I say impossible? Sorry, impossible. I feel like this is maybe another good place for there to be a lot of trade and traffic. So yeah, Dark Forest in Germany, exactly. Nuclear Wolf, exactly. So I'm trying to think, like, it's some kind of a trade hub. It's close to Oros, trade hub. Close to both, founded before the mass exodus from Obsidios into Rubicos, situated near Oros, Rubicos, and Emeros. So that feels like it would have a lot of interplay. There aren't tons of like, ooh, yeah, what if we do, well, because, so my thinking is that you would get a lot of, like one of the things that's interesting about Ondune is that half-orcs are much more common in this setting than they are in other settings. Because orcs are one of the great world powers of Ondune, and they have much more cordial relations with other peoples than they do in most settings. Like the orcs aren't this kind of like marauding Tolkien-esque, you know, people. They are a sophisticated, developed nation. One of the like, yeah, Vaughn's saying, oh, maybe this can be like a Singapore analog, a great city with lots of history that survived the undead wave. I think that's pretty close. I think it's something like that. I like the idea of it being kind of a half-orc populace, right? This is like a half-orc city. A half-orc city founded by merchants from Obsidios attempting, Yeah, David says maybe a strong navy presence around this dock because pirates might like the area. I mean, if it's a trading city, that definitely makes sense. Attempting to tap into. I'm like mixing it all up. Okay, so let's go history. Founded by humans. Founded by human merchants from Obsidios. Founded by human merchants from Obsidios. Hungry to tap into the untouched natural resources of Rubicos. Strong, let's see. So let's go culture. How did the orcs get here? So we're gonna move around a little bit on this map. It's worth 27 points in Scrabble. Thank you for checking that, M. Grant. I appreciate that. So if you look over here on the kind of the center of the map right now is a place called Harashta. Harashta is the orcish was one of the first orcish settlements to develop, or the first orcish cultures to develop sea travel. So, long story short, sort of traditionalist orc culture in my world, and it's definitely not universal. It actually kind of begins in Throka's cradle there, and the more sort of conservative-minded orcs still hold to these practices, but the more progressive and modernist orcs don't. Basically says that the earth itself is sacred, right? Yeah, that's exactly right, Vaughn. A lot of the Obsidios refugees would have fled to Rubicos to escape the undead, precisely. So I can see it being very, very overcrowded right now. Ooh, that's interesting culturally. I keep getting distracted. You guys keep talking in the chat, and it's distracting me. No, I really appreciate all your enthusiasm and ideas, guys. Overcrowded with refugees from Obsidios. So the orcs in Ondune believe that the earth is sacred, and that by cutting down trees or mining, you are damaging the earth. They don't believe the same thing about animals, however, and they see animals as being they're sort of like their peers, and that they are encouraged to compete with their peers for survival. So hunting and herding are common practice among traditionalist orc populations, but not all orc populations are that traditionalist. And so Harashta basically were one of the first to strike out across the sea. They made like ships out of bone, massive beasts that they and then like use their particular form of necromancy called bone shaping to shape into vessels, and then they went out across the sea. So Harashta is kind of where the notion of orcish sea power and orcish expansion began. The players are going to head through Harashta, so it would be interesting to see, a colony, like a Harashtan colony up there, even though it's further away, right? That it's almost like the British Empire thing. So maybe it was actually founded by orcish explorers from Harashta, but it was like founded by orcish explorers from Harashta, and so you ended up with a small orcish population there, but merchants from Obsidios arrived and helped strengthen the community and foster trade. That's cool. I like that. So it's a little bit of both. Like I think it's got a strong half-orc population. I think that's true of a lot of these like cities that border Oros would have like a good mix of humans and orcs. It wouldn't be, one or the other. I like the idea of the Navy being a cultural thing. A strong navy to help defend their ships that ply the Draconic Ocean. That's cool. I feel like it's like culturally missing something. So like what's the like hook here beyond it just being like a trading city, right? Because I feel like there are so many of those in the world. Like, what's unusual about this place? Is it something geographical? Is it something historical? Is it something magical? You know, I like it being overcrowded with refugees. I like it being a trade city. I like it having a half-orc population. But I don't know what is it about the place that makes it unusual or interesting. Like, it has this history from Harashta and, like, the bone ships. Is there something along the lines of, like, you know, because we're gonna go do so much orc stuff that, like, leaning too heavily into the orc origin of it, I think, like, we're gonna get so much orc culture in the campaign when we go down to Throka's Cradle and Harashta. So I'm hesitant to do too much orcish stuff, but a cool little, like, hint about, like, this is kind of, you know, what's to come, I don't think is bad. It's just a question of, like, what do we do here? What makes it interesting? Yeah, gosh, what is it gonna be? It's in Rubicos, so, like, my instinct is, you know, it's built on a cliff, or it's got some kind of a geographical weirdness to it. But Sval Harbor has also had a lot of geographical weirdness. I mean, it shouldn't be islands, because the schism down there has a lot of islands. They work with wildlife in most tasks. I could see that. I think that's also pretty common for orcish populations. I need something specific. Like, what's this? I want something, like, magical. I want something weird, right? Like, why here? Like, what was it about this spot that made the original explorers come here? Yeah, I think that's true, David. I think that's right. Lots of beasts of burden, working with animals. It's common. I think that's generally true of orcish populations. They tend to be more incorporated with animals than other societies like dwarves or humans. But that's true broadly for orcs. So, like, what is it about this place? Why did the original orcish explorers settle here? Like, what was it about this location that was interesting to them? Like, are they sea caves, right, that work their way back into the cliff? Is it an unusually shaped mountain? You know, Vaughn is talking about volcanoes. Like, is it a volcano? You know, like, what's the benefit here? Like, why did they stop here? Is it something religious? Is it something magical? Like, I want it to be kind of fantastical. Like, I want a little bit of a dash of fantasy in here. Sval Harbors has that with the water is bioluminescent. Yeah, it could be. Is it like a spawning ground for a certain kind of animal or something? Like fish or dragon turtles or something like that? Yeah, man, this one's eluding me. I feel like I'm not on the premise. I'm gonna get some more water. I'll be back in, like, 30 seconds. Yeah, we're close. There's something. There's something we're missing. Be right back. Hey, see you later, M. Graham. Thanks for coming, man. Appreciate it. Yeah. Still don't have it. Something about beasts is cool. It never rains inside the city walls. Yeah, man, I don't know. This is a tricky one. Something about at least the Underdark or a different plane. The Underdark could make sense. There are a lot of caverns and stuff in Rubicos. It's on the coast. It's a vibrant coastal trading city. Like, what would have been the thing that would have drawn? Like, I like the idea that the that the orcs settled here for a more sentimental reason or a more emotional reason, right? Something like religion or sentiment or whatever. But the merchants came because they were able to exploit something. I'm still kind of thinking about this like salmon spawning thing, right? How does salmon work? A national harbor, I think all that's fine, but I feel like it needs like something a little stronger. Like, so salmon swim upriver, right? And then spawn, and then die. Is that how salmon work? How does salmon? Let me check. How do salmon spawn? Well, yeah, not that exactly, but like salmon run. Having migrated from the ocean to fresh water, swim against the stream to the upper reaches of the river where they spawn in gravel beds, and then they all die, and the salmon life cycle starts over again. So my thought here is that it's like a salmon spawning place, right? That there's a river, and it's built around this river, and that there are these fish. Maybe they're salmon, maybe they're a magical kind of fish, whatever they are, and they come in like huge, like preposterous numbers, right? Like millions and millions and millions of them swim up this river, right? And so it's natural that you would stay here because you could fish them, right? And like bears and things come down here to catch them as they come in. Yeah, I think it's something like that. And I think we can play with this idea that David had earlier about like maybe the fish have like a luminescence to them. Like there's something about these fish that creates this effect. Like for a couple of days a year, it's like this the river is like constantly flooded with these fish. And yeah, maybe it's that salmon run thing where they have to go up, right? And up and up and up and up. Yeah, okay. So culture, the like what am I thinking about? The a yearly like salmon run. A yearly salmon run where yeah, it's like red fish where millions of fish. I mean, it's not the most exciting, but it does like what I need is like the reason that they would have settled here, right? A red herring, if you will. And where millions of fish swim upriver to spawn in freshwater lakes and ponds in mainland Rubicos. Mainland Rubicos. Animals. So talking about David's idea, right, about animals, like what if there's a thing, like a cultural idea where like bears during this period, bears often wander the city streets, half tame, and fish in the rivers. People give the bears space. You don't crowd the bears. They do their fishing and leave. So like obviously that's absurd because bears can be very dangerous, but the idea of it, thinking about it a lot like the way that cows sometimes are treated in certain Hindu cities, right? Where it's like there's this element of like you don't kind of mess with them, you sort of let them do their own thing, and the notion of going to a city and seeing like just a Kodiak bear just like walking around, that's Vaughn's right there with me. So the bear then becomes like a symbol. It's like a part of their heraldry. The bear and the fish. Their heraldry. Yeah, we're absolutely in sync with those bears. Heraldry. Yeah, I love that. That's cool. I mean, you could also see there being like, I don't know how deep we need to get into this, but like what I like about that idea is that like there's a tension. This creates a tension that like Bear crossing signs, yeah, absolutely. So like, I don't know if anybody knows about like Monterey Bay and like the sardines there, but like when people kind of like were, yeah, the claw and scale, were constantly claw and fin, fur and fin. I don't know. But that feels like the name of like a brewery or something, right? Um, but like the sardines in like around the area of Monterey Bay, like they would just overfish the shit out of them, right? Like they would just suck them into this big tube and just millions of sardines, you know, like way more than they needed, just like endlessly. Like they thought they were never gonna run out of these fish, right? Eddie Druid caught wild shaving into a bear. It can be seen as offensive. That's cool. But it creates this tension between like you need to about overfishing, right? There's so many of them that it's easy to overfish, but what they're doing is they're going to go breed. And so if you catch too many of them, then they won't be able to breed and there'll be fewer of them that come down, right? So like this creates a tension. The fish are literally going to reproduce. It's considered, you must be careful. You must be careful how much you fish. How much you fish. Yeah, that's some Tormund Giantsbane shit there, Vaughn. What happens in bear form stays in bear form, right? Just be careful how much you fish. Spawning month is a time of love. Yeah, I think that's cool. I'm into it. So let's talk about this navy for a second. Because when is that, by the way, in the real world? Like, when is the salmon run? What time of year? Most salmon migrate during the autumn, September through November. Because it's got to be one of those things where, like, if they're going to go there, it has to be during that time. You know what I mean? It can't be like, well, that happens later in the year. There's a lot of fish. Well, there's no fish right now. It's just like a normal place. You know what I mean? Like, that's boring. Currently, I believe it's like the beginning of summer in the campaign. It will take them a while to get here, but I'll just move it and say that it's whenever, right? Like, yeah, if it's like end of summer, so like September could make sense, right? Beginning of autumn. Okay. I like it being a month too. That it's like a long time. It's just like an absurd number of fish going all the time through the river. Let's talk about its navy. Well, I actually think that might be good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need there. Like, need some name, but I'll do the name later. I'm not too worried about the name. I can figure those out. Swimming upstream is a feat of strength. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think it's like tons of waterfalls and stuff. Like, yeah, the city is built on islands, is constructed around the river. City is constructed around the river with many small islands and like the river delta, basically, the river delta. With many small islands and openings. Many waterfalls and pools to watch the fish swim up. And it's like for some reason they just do this river. Like they don't do other rivers. This is the one because it leads to the headwaters, right? So it has there's some significance to it, right? They only come back to this one spot. They don't do the other rivers. It's like just this one for whatever reason about something weird about the fish. Yeah, I'm into that. It's like a salmon city, a city of salmon. So they have a strong navy. The players meet with not the pirate themselves, but they meet with a representative of the pirate who then like takes them to where they need to go. So let's talk about our final. Well, I guess we have two things actually. So our next port. So that's kind of the salmon city. I feel pretty okay about that. I feel like it could have needed a little more, but I think we can get there. So the next one is over here. So basically what happened is that previously in the campaign, the characters basically booked passage on board a pirate ship. They were trying to get to a place that nobody else really wanted to go, and so they had to hire somebody a little bit less scrupulous, and they essentially hired this pirate to ferry them to this place that was, dangerous to go to. Rather than paying the pirate, what they did is they instead offered them basically like, hey, here's a future favor. Like, you can hire us for free for a small contract, depending on what it is. And so my thought was to basically, they've totally forgotten about this. This happened a long time ago in the campaign. So my thought is that while they're crossing the ocean, they bump into, they hired a suspect Uber. It's exactly what it is. They bump into a representative from this pirate who is here in this town, was waiting for them, and basically says like, hey, listen, she's calling in her favor. And so now they have to kind of take a detour to go do this thing and have this little side quest, right? Get that done and then go back to the main contract. So the idea for the reason that like this pirate would hire a mercenary army is, I think, pretty simple. My idea is that she has recently taken a very large prize. Maybe she sunk a treasure fleet or something like that, right? NPCs do call in their favors. Exactly. They've completely forgotten about this. And I'm like, no, yes, it's time. And so the idea is that she has taken this big prize, but she doesn't have anywhere to store it, right? She's worried about sailing around with all of this treasure. And yeah, maybe they blow it off. Who knows? Maybe they do, and then that's just where we are, and whatever, they get in trouble. I think if they blow it off, then their ship gets pirated, right? Like, she comes after them. So she's taken this big prize recently, and she wants their help to find somewhere she can secure it. So I like the notion of them having to go and take a fort somewhere, that's held by somebody else. That way the pirate can take it over and have it be their base of operations and store their vast treasure in this fort. That's basically my idea, is that why else would a pirate want a mercenary army? It's got to be to do something that she can't do on her own, and that like she could maybe take the fort on her own, but it would be easier if she had this kind of like expendable army of mooks where she doesn't really care if a bunch of them die because they're not her people and she's not paying for them, right? Because she has this favor. Great, so that's the idea, but I think in order to do that, I don't think, if this place has a strong navy, I don't think that, there absolutely would be consequences. They're not making good on their debt. If they blow her off, then she will 100% come after them, and they're going to have problems other places. They don't tend to travel in particularly well-armed ships, so I think they would be especially susceptible to pirates, so they do have, 300 soldiers. At that point, though, if they choose to blow her off here in the Salmon City, then they're actually kind of in trouble because they're sending half of their force away to go do another contract, which means that they'll be at half strength if they come into conflict with her, which would be good. Bad for them, but good for me. So what we need then is basically like a second location to meet these pirates, right? That if the Salmon City has a strong navy, it would make sense that they wouldn't want to send her notorious pirate ship, the Silver Saber, over there. They would want to meet somewhere else that's a little bit, more welcoming to pirates. So my thought is that the fort, here, let's zoom out a little bit. The fort is probably somewhere on the northern coast of Obsidios, because I don't want it to be like completely in the wrong direction. Like, they do need to go to Harashta, and they do need to go to their contract, so I don't want them to have to, like, if they think they have to sail all the way in this completely other direction, then yeah, they're going to be more likely to blow her off. So I want it to seem reasonable that they could probably go and do this. So I think that the fort is somewhere here on the northern coast of Obsidios, and it, protects something, or it serves some purpose, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I think in order to get to that, they have to go somewhere that is friendly to pirates on the way. And I liked the idea of, like, almost an Isla de Muerta style island that is, like, weirdly in the middle of the ocean, which makes it very difficult to navigate to. And so, it's like somewhere, like, they leave the Salmon City, and it's like, here. It's like somewhere weird. Ooh, the Salmon City offer letters of marque? I like that. That's cool. They offer letters of marque. Good reference there, Vaughn. offer letters of marque to protect. Maybe they don't have a strong navy. Maybe their navy is made up of privateers. Not a strong navy, but instead a strong privateer force. Strong navy, but instead they offer letters of marque to privateers to defend their ships. Yeah, I like that. That's even stronger. Great. So I think that then they have to sail to this, like, this place in the middle of the Draconic Ocean that is essentially a pirate hub. A pirate port located in the middle of the Draconic Ocean. Yeah, expendable hirelings, exactly. Located in the middle of the Draconic Ocean. Difficult to get to. Right? Like, you can imagine that an island like smack dab in the middle of this vast ocean will be harder to find. Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. I just dribbled a little bit of water on my laptop. 1 second, everybody. Sorry, folks. Just a little dollop of water on my shift key. Thankfully, it just landed right on top of the key. It didn't actually like go into any of the cracks, so I can just kind of dab it up. Whoops. Yeah, the Salmon City red shirts. Yeah, no name necessary. You're fine. Okay. Okay, we are good. Crisis averted, everybody. Crisis averted. It is astonishing how long I've like had a computer and not just like dumped something on it. Like, I'm sure, you know, if you have done that, I apologize. I'm not here to call you out, but like, it's crazy how often I like have liquid near my computer and it never ends up on it, right? Like, I don't know. It's crazy. I'm gonna put you over here now, so it's much less likely that that happens. Okay, so difficult to get to, perhaps guarded magically. So I think the tone here is that it's less like a pirate port in the sense that it is a, you know, an actual port city. You know, like I don't think it's like a town. Maybe it's like an old abandoned. Ooh, yeah, it's like a ghost town. Ooh, yeah, okay. So culture or history, like a failed colony. A failed colony from some over-ambitious Obsidian city. So the way Obsidios works is that there are, they're called the 100 cities of Obsidios. It's unclear whether there are actually 100 of them, but the idea is that they're all these independent city-states that, like, there's so much thick jungle in Obsidios, it makes it very difficult to consolidate power. And so you get these little city-states that rule themselves and are constantly squabbling with each other, but there's no central unifying power. It's very hard to have logistical communications across the jungle in that way. Humans also didn't develop magic on their own. They had to basically come into contact with elves or dwarves or orcs, who each developed one of the different types of magic. And so, oh, that's interesting. Vaughn says, could be a gathering of ships that float about but can't be found without foreknowledge of where they're going to be. I think that's cool. I think that's a little... I like that idea, and I want to use it somewhere else in a more piratey campaign. This is the problem, is that, like, because it's set in a particular time period, right, that, like, if I use all my cool pirate ideas now in kind of this, like, ancient, you know, Greek Roman era, that I can't use them later. So, like, I love that idea and I'm into it, but I think this has to be a little bit less cool, a little bit less piratey, because it's an awesome concept, but if I burn it now, then I can't use it later in a game that has more pirates in it. So that's the weird thing. It's like, I know I'm going to run more pirate games on Dune, so I have to be careful not to burn all the good ideas. But yes, the, like, city made up of ships that are tied together, right, is rad and a classic staple of pirate fantasy fiction, but I can't burn it here. So my thinking is that, like, it's a ghost town. It's like it was a failed colony, right? from some overambitious Obsidian City, trying to monopolize trade with Obsidios, or with Rubicos. Maybe it was even meant to be a base for privateers. Perhaps it was meant as a base for privateers. But the problem is, mostly destroyed by a volcano? Ooh. You're really on a volcano kick today, but I love that idea. Thank you, Vaughn. That's great. A volcano exploded on the island, destroying the colony and making it like, did the volcano in some way affect? Because I like the idea that it is hard to get to. Is there something about that would have messed up like the approaches, or would have like destroying the colony? Krakatoa, yeah, destroying the colony. Now it's occasionally used as a base for pirate meetings. Nothing is permanent here, but you can careen and like repair and refit. But the island is seeded with ash, making it like impossible. Although doesn't like ash, doesn't that actually make it more fertile? Like if you're near a volcano? Because I like the idea that it's this like gray, ugly, like uninhabitable rock, essentially, right? Like it used to be a prosperous or potentially prosperous colony, but then the volcano blew, and it kind of like ruined the island. Krakatoa. Does volcanic ash help soil? Huh. So maybe it's the opposite. Like destroying the colony, refit. Okay, we're getting too far here. I mean, I wonder if it's a thing where like, connects to the plane of fire. That's cool. I wonder if it's a thing where the like destroying the colony, because it was meant to be a base for privateers, to refit the city in question. The city that founded it never told anyone where it was. Thus making it that much harder to find. Like its location is essentially a secret, because it was like a state secret, right? The pirates found it. I don't think anyone lives there. I think it's like largely abandoned culture. Do they think it's haunted? No one lives there. No one lives on the island. Persistent stories about hauntings and the like. The island is verdant and overgrown, making it a good place to repair and refit. That there's like lots of vegetation because of the ash, right? Yeah, but it's like an absolute pain in the ass to find. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think that's cool. And it's just like a weird dot in the middle of the ocean that Fairview people, know how to get to. Like the party would have like sailed right past it before, but never knew it was there because it's weirdly hard to get to. Because Vaughn mentioned the idea of shoals, and I definitely could see shoals, but I like the idea that like it's just outside all the trade winds and stuff. Like you kind of have to. It's a bit of a faff to like get to. It's not necessarily in a Sargasso, it's just enough of a pain, and there's nothing there, and nobody goes there, right? That's honestly, I think, enough. Like, I don't think we need any more than that, because they're just there to meet the pirate, right? And then lay out the plan. So they have, like, meeting in, like, bombed out buildings and stuff like that, right? And, like, laying out maps and stuff. Yeah, that feels very cool. Okay, cool. So the last thing I want to do then, we have about 20 minutes left of the stream. I want to talk about this fort they have to go and attack. So the trick is that it's a fort, right? But it would be a fort that's controlled by a colonial power. Well, not a colonial power, but it would have to be controlled presumably by one of these city-states, right? That are here, like in Obsidios. We have 2 of them on the map right now, but there are, so many. We have Jarkoth here, and then Tsunabi down here. But I think it's like up here-ish, kind of on the northern coast. Let me draw the thing. And what's tricky is that these are like the kind of whole conceit of Obsidios is that there's not enough control. Like, the jungle prevents them from really consolidating power, right? So what fort is this? Whose fort is it? And how could it be there if like a fort implies like a colonial power? It implies somebody who like has to set up a stronghold somewhere distant from where they are, right? Because they're not conquering a city, they're conquering a fort. And it has to be an occupied fort if you need an army. If it's like an abandoned fort, that makes a little bit more sense in the context of like the history of this part of the world. But it has to be occupied, right? But these cities don't have much influence outside their own borders, right? So this would have to be a city that has set up and is garrisoning a fort. Yeah, it's like the Amazon rainforest. It's like crisscrossed with rivers and things like that, but it's very, very difficult to navigate. And these cities don't have a lot of ability to interact with one another beyond to like do some fighting. Basically, you can't really conquer it. There's no territory to conquer because the rainforest is so thick and it's often very dangerous. It's got kind of like a Chult vibe, right? And it's not all rainforest, but it's like a large section of the continent is forested. So the question, it's got to be a coastal fort, and it's got to be occupied, right? So let's get the summary going here. It's a coastal fort. It's occupied. It has to be something that the pirates could conceivably take. What if it's a thing where like a coastal fort occupied presumably by an obsidian city-state. Occupied presumably by an obsidian city-state, like remote enough that a pirate could conceivably capture and hold the fort. Hold the fort. Hold down the fort. Hold the fort without too much Ooh, a prison break is interesting. Expectation of reprisal. A prison break. So, prison break is interesting. I feel like you don't need an army for a prison break, though. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's like they do want the fort, but it's a prison. Were there like ancient prisons? I'm not saying we can't have one. Like they didn't have ancient salmon cities either, or frost giants. I'm trying to think like, is there a good like model to base that off of? Ancient prison colonies, ancient prisons. What's the oldest prison in the world? What were ancient prisons like? Prisons in ancient Rome. Australia. So, like, yeah, it's remote enough that a pirate can easily capture and hold the fort without too much expectation of a reprisal. Because my idea was kind of like yeah, right? It's like a army fights and the PCs sneak in. Could be, but I feel like pirates could do that, right? I feel like a pirate crew would be able to do that. I don't know that they would need a huge army to conquer it. If all they need to do is like sneak in and grab somebody, that feels like a stealth operation that you don't need to involve an army for. If you do I think you could like combine it. Also, and this is something that you guys would know, so it's not your fault. But like the PCs in my party love to like basically ignore their army, and that's something they've been talking about. So we gotta really use our army more because their army basically has bad morale, so they're never being used. So the last thing I want to do is like encourage them with a mission that would require them to sneak in. The two-prong thing is interesting. Like I think if you did it like prison is not one of the walls, or rather it's the only safe haven in a dangerous jungle area. Like, that's kind of what I'm thinking. If it's this idea of, like, a city that collapsed or, like, was conquered or whatever, right? Like, and this is, like, a bastion. Like, they had some forward, you know, fort that they were trying to, like, control another river mouth or something like that, right? And, yeah, that's it. Okay. I don't hate the prison idea, but I think the conceit is a fort constructed on an island that blocks a river mouth. It's a river mouth that is the only access point for an inland city. This is a little complicated, but like, so it's basically like you have a river, right? And there's an inland city that's built on the river, and then it goes out and it empties out into the ocean. Maybe there are cliffs or something that prevent them from building a city there, so they have to go a little bit inland. But then there's an island near the river mouth. I don't know if you can see all the way up here. There's an island near the river mouth, and it has a fort on it. Somebody came and took it and then used it as a base. They built a fort there. Maybe it's a ruin or something. They built a fort there. Another city built a fort there to control the shipping that's coming up this river. So the pirates come in, they take over the fort, and then they basically take over the business of taxing the ships that come and go. And they make a deal with the river city to say, hey, we'll sit here and we'll prevent that other city for 10% less loot or whatever, right? That's kind of the deal that Zillion intends to make. Cool. So I think that's it. I think it's like a fort that's been sitting there, constructed on a thing. I think the history of it is that like there was some kind of a ruin there or something. History. There was a ruin. Prisoners took over the prison from the Salmon City or whoever. I want the old fort. I want someone to remove the riffraff from it. Yeah, I don't hate it, but I just feel like you might as well just do a fort then. If it's like a, I feel like they're much more likely to make a deal with the prisoners than they are to like purge them, you know? I feel like if the party knows that there are prisoners there, all the prisoners presumably want is to leave. They don't probably want to stay there and occupy this jungle fort, you know? I don't think it's a bad hook. I just don't know that it quite works in the con, because I need them to use the army. I need them to like get some army practice in, right? Like this has to be a force that wants to hold the fort and wouldn't surrender or wouldn't, you know, like, I mean, if they have a really great idea, but I think like a group of prisoners are like prone to surrender in that context, right? Like, I think it'd be the opposite if they were like hired by the people who ran the prison to clear it out. Okay, then they would probably fight. But I think if it's a bunch of third-party pirates coming in, you know, there was a ruin here originally. City. Okay, so hold on. Fort constructed on an island that blocks a river mouth that is the only access point for an inland city. For City 2, for City 1. For City 1. City 2 built a fort on the island. To control the shipping of City 1. City 1. The characters need to take the fort and allow the pirate to offer City 2 or City 1 better terms than City 2. Okay, cool. The ruin here originally, city, something spooky or haunted about the ruin. Yeah, okay. Well, we're already coming from like a ruined island, so maybe a ruin is too much, but I like the idea of there being a little bit of extra flavor, that like there was some kind of a stronghold here once upon a time, and that the City 2 coming in is basically building on those foundations. I don't even hate the idea that the fort is like a shitty like Roman fort, right? Where it's like made from wood. It's not even necessarily a good one, because you have to remember they don't have cannons. You know, they got like one siege engine. They've got a scorpion, and the pirate ship is a catapult. This is all just a way for me to create a, yeah, you're exactly right, Vaughn. Yeah, A Tale of Two Cities. I'm just like picky with my names. What do we think is the cool thing about this fort? Like, what's the cool? Maybe it was a prison. That's interesting. There was a ruin here originally, something spooky or haunted. Perhaps it was once a prison. That it was once a prison that City 1 used. Ooh, this means there are a large number of prisoners still in the fort that the party could potentially free. Although, does that encourage them to do that instead of attack it? Like, I'm just worried that they're gonna be like, okay, what if we sneak in? Okay, I think that's good. I like the idea of the prison. I think that gives it a little bit of extra angle there. That it was a prison that controlled. Ooh, hordes of undead. Not this far north, but that's interesting. That's interesting. I mean, maybe it's further south, you know? You have to go pretty far south, though. I mean, yeah, what if it's down here? What if it is? What if it's like in the spoils? That's kind of cool. Fuck this. What if we go... Maybe you're right, Vaughn. Maybe it's this. We go down here. So that changes it. Basically throws all that out if we do that. But then the conceit is that it was a fort that's no longer occupied by a force. It's occupied by undead. Okay. So let's change it. A new concept, new idea. A fort occupied by a powerful city-state that fell during the Night Wars. This fort is now haunted by undead, and thus extra spooky. The pirates think it would make an especially good... Yeah, armies are absolutely useful against hordes of undead, especially good hideout, because nobody is gonna come here and fuck with them, right? Like, no naval power wants this back, right? No naval power expects this back, and it's haunted and metal as hell. Mission is to clear out the undead here. Who better than veterans of the Night Wars? Which is something that the company, before it was a company, was an army fighting against the undead. And then when the war ended, they kind of became a professional company, a professional mercenary company. And so, yeah, it makes total sense. Bingo. Yeah, you busted it open, Vaughn. Nice job. Good thinking. I love that. Okay. I think that's it, everybody. I think we have our 4 locations. I love that. Okay, it's Tva Harbors, right? We have the Salmon City, which needs a name still, but I'll think of something cool. We have the Draconic Ocean, the Pirate Port, which I love the Vesuvius thing you came up with there, Vaughn. That's great. Yeah, and then the fort, which is very much like a, and they've done that before. They've been to the spoils in a previous campaign, so the idea of like going back to a spoiled area feels like it's once again playing with one of the big themes of the campaign, which I appreciate. They've been away from it for a while. Like Coombe, way up here, had some black bloat stuff going on, which is the kind of disease that was created by the war. But they haven't been near the spoils in a long time, and so it's kind of cool to like throw them back into it and remind them like, yeah, half of the world is still grappling with this. Yes, cool. That is it. We did it. That was we actually did a 2-hour stream, everybody. I feel like that's a rare event these days. Great. So a big thank you to everybody who came out. Shout out to Vaughn, to David, to Nuker Wolf, to Grant Campbell was in here for like a moment. Where did Grant go? Did he just pop in to say hey? Yeah, he just said hey. What's up, Grant? Thanks for coming. And Grant as well. I get the two Grants mixed up. Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. We really appreciate it. We will be back on Thursday with a monster design stream. We'll be talking about the Pegasus. I still have not finished the Cyclops for the Patreon. It's turning out to be a more complicated monster than I had anticipated. As we were doing the stream, I was like, oh, I gotta make all these items. So that's gonna take a little bit. We might not get the Cyclops for a bit, but we will still be doing the Pegasus stream on Thursday, so come check that out. There'll be another Sea of Thieves stream, which reminds me I have to edit that video and get it up here on YouTube. That'll be on Saturday. And then there'll even be a world building stream probably on Sunday, excitingly, as we will dive into presumably some more Throkus Cradle stuff. Maybe we'll build those cities in Harashta. I'm not sure. Great, but that is our stream. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. You can follow me on Twitter. You can please like and subscribe if you haven't already. A like on the video helps the algorithm, and obviously if you're not subscribed and you're watching this, please subscribe. I assume that if you're in the chat right now, you're already subscribed, but just checking in. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. We'll be back on Thursday with another stream, but until then, thanks for watching, and as always, happy adventuring. Let me fix my thing. There's the lobby. Thanks for watching.